Shit's gone sideways.
All right, Peter Lavac,
Good morning.
welcome to Shit's Gone Sideways.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Now, I mean, you're a man who, I guess, if you were a character in a book or a movie, you'd find it hard to believe that such a person would be an unbelievable character, right? But here you are.
Well, mate, you know, a lot of people, when I tell them some of these stories, I've been hassled now for years to sit down and write a book about this stuff.
Yep.
And I've often thought, yeah, why not? But something's always intervened. There's been other things stepping in. So eventually we did a podcast.
Yep, so you've got a podcast called The Lambo Lawyer.
That's it, yep.
Right.
It was launched about in end of November.
Yep. And so you were a criminal lawyer for 46 years?
46 years, criminal law, yes.
And so you're a criminal lawyer by day and almost an action hero by night with some of your accomplishments. So let's go through them quickly. You're a world record holding surf ski champion.
Yes.
Surf lifesaver.
Yes.
Pro wrestler.
Yes.
Stuntman.
Yes.
Bouncer.
Yes.
Male model.
Yes.
Race car driver.
Yes.
You've saved a judge's life.
Yes.
And you've disarmed a gunman.
In the Sydney Hilton Hotel when I was a bouncer there. Yes.
That's quite a CV.
All of the above, mate.
Right. I think, look, before we get into all of that, I think let's just start with the thing which brought you to international attention, and then we'll hear about the crazy life of Peter Lavac. So you were all over the news. When was it? Last year?
Started off about 2 years ago.
Yeah. So you became
2.5.
a national news story, or an international news story, because your Lamborghini had the license plate LGOPNR leg opener.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
Which is also, what colour yellow do we say? Is it a canary yellow? What kind of?
Yeah, it's a canary yellow with a black roof, and
Yeah.
the back's sort of a combination of yellow and black. It's got black and yellow lattice work.
And so you were driving it with that license plate for over a year before.
Almost a year, no problem.
Yeah.
They gave me the plates, no problem.
And then one person gets offended.
Someone must have got offended, fired in a complaint, and the fat cat bureaucrats sitting behind their desks with their pencil necks and their narrow shoulders decided to have a go at me, and they picked the wrong guy to fuck with.
So you got a letter in the mail saying that you had to change your plates? What happened?
Got a letter in the mail from some bureaucrat, very offensive, aggressive letter, arrogant letter, telling me that I had to return the plates. The Transport New South Wales deemed them to be offensive. And the irony here, Andrew, is that I was going to change the plates anyway. I'd had them for a whole year. Yep. I was going to put on other plates. And the surest way to make me do something in life is to tell me I can't do it or I'm not allowed to do it.
Just a red rag to a bull.
So I said, well, fuck you. See you in court, guys. And we took them to court. I wasn't going to hand them back.
Yeah.
No way.
It's always, with these things, it always seems like, I mean, firstly, Transport New South Wales approved them in the first place.
Yeah.
And then you're driving around for over a year, and I think either most people would go over their head anyway, that they wouldn't even get it,
They wouldn't know what it meant.
Or even if they did, they'd find it funny.
But people who knew what it meant thought it was hilarious,
Yep.
very clever, very witty, and very appropriate for me.
As a known ladies' man.
Well, I've in my past life, I was a bit of a playboy.
Yeah.
But since I married my beautiful third wife, I've left that playboy lifestyle behind.
How long have you guys been married?
16 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, leg opener. It always seems like with these things, it only takes one person to get offended for it to for them to consider. That should be. It's the same with pubs, right?
Yeah.
Pubs, someone can move in next to a 100-year-old pub and put in a noise complaint, even though the pub's been there for 100 years, and suddenly they're getting noise restrictions.
Well, you know what, Andrew? I see this as a freedom of expression, freedom of speech issue. And freedom of speech under our democratic system is fair. And freedom of speech also involves freedom to offend.
Yep.
When you have freedom of speech, you have the freedom to offend people. Nothing wrong with that, as long as you're not inciting violence, racism, or hatred.
Yep.
The right to offend is a fair right. And people who are offended by things like this, by number plates or anything else, they choose to be offended.
Yep.
And you know what? That's their problem, not my problem.
These miserable people would rather focus on that and put in a complaint than just move on with their fucking life.
And, you know, these are people like the Karens and the snowflakes and the PC mob and the woke weirdos. They go through life looking for things to be offended by.
It's a bit of a luxury, right?
Yeah,
the
now,
luxury of being
I
offended.
was interviewed about this by a female journalist when the story broke, and she said, Pete, what do you say to people who are offended by your number plates? And I said to her, well, tough shit.
Be offended.
Get a life.
Move
Get
on with
a
your
life.
life, yeah.
Get a sense of humour. Get over it. Tough shit. That was my response to that. And that's my response to anyone who's offended by anything that I do.
There's probably one person who saw your license plate once, got offended, even though the fact that they probably would have never seen your car again in their life, right?
Yeah. And maybe worked out what the plates meant. They put two and two together. Most people didn't know what it meant. The ones who did know what it meant thought it was hilarious and funny and highly appropriate.
Yep. And so what was the outcome in court?
Okay, well, what happened when I took him to court, we did all the paperwork. We went to Fairfield Court initially. And
That must have pissed them off that you were taking them to court in the first place.
oh, shit, yeah, it pissed them off. And good.
Yeah.
That was the intention.
Yeah.
And I got two Top Gun lawyers to represent me. I didn't represent myself. I had a senior QC and a junior barrister, Sasha Milanovic, who's a good mate. He's a playboy and a Casanova, and he loved this case. He was interviewed by a Current Affair when the story broke on the movie set of this gangster movie I was doing. And Sasha loved being interviewed. He was right into it. So we went to Fairfield Court initially. The magistrate threw it out because the idiot who wrote me the letter wrote it under the wrong legislation. It had been repealed, no longer exists. So that was it. And I thought, okay, maybe that's the end of it. Yeah. And then they decided they were going to bat on because they must have lost a lot of face over this and all the publicity. The whole world was laughing at them by now because it was all over the internet. So they decided to bat on, and I thought, all right, bring it on. I'll give you a fucking war you will not believe. And we gave them a war they will never forget, I promise you.
But sadly, in the end, they made you have to change the place. Is that what they
didn't make me.
Yeah.
No one makes me do anything.
Yep.
They ordered the cops to pull me over and seize the plates unlawfully, illegally. I was driving along Pittwater Road one day and a highway patrol car pulled me over. And the guy said, look, the boss got an email from Transport New South Wales to seize your plates. And I said, well, mate, you can't because it's before the courts. We're in court next Monday. This was a Thursday. If you seize them, that's unlawful. The only person who can seize them is the magistrate. The matter's still pending in court. So he's a junior young guy. And he thought, oh, I better go and call the boss and see what's happening. So he went and radioed in. And when he came back, there was another police car came. So they had about 4 cops on the scene. They must have thought I was going to get them involved in a Wild West gunfight and speed off in a racing car.
Just over some fucking
and he came and he said to me, look, I'm really sorry, mate. The boss says I've got to seize them. I'm just following orders. And I said, yeah, that was the defence of the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal. All these Nazis were following orders of Hitler. So I said, all right, well, go for it, mate. Do what you got to do. And he said, take the plates off. I said, no, I'm not going to take them off. If you want them, you take them off.
Do your own dirty work.
Yeah, so all right. So I stood on the roadside with my arms folded watching these idiots rolling around in the dirt trying to pull the plates off. And they couldn't. They're stuck on with double-sided tape super glue. So they're trying to pull them on. They're huffing and puffing. The uniforms are all dirty and
It must have brought you some
dust.
satisfaction.
And it did. I was laughing at this. People were laughing at them who were watching this debacle. Eventually, one of these bright boys in blue decided to get a screwdriver. So they eventually managed to prise them off.
Yep.
But I said to them, look, guys, before you take them off, why don't we just drive back to my garage? It's only 100 metres away. And you can take the plates off there because I can't drive the car once you've taken them off. He said, oh, no, we can't do that. I said, well, why? We can go on a convoy. One police car in front, one police car in the back, so I can't escape. Yeah. And he said, oh, no, if you have an accident, I'll really be in the shit. And I said, well, how am I going to, you can drive slowly, 5 kilometres an hour. No, our orders are to seize them right now.
What do they expect you to do?
Well, I thought they must have thought I'd speed off if they let me drive back. So they pulled the plates off, and I was then stuck there without plates on the side of the road. And one of the police cars took the plates to Transport New South Wales up at Brookvale somewhere, and the other police car circled the block at least 6, 7, 8 times, waiting for me to hop in the car and drive back to my garage 100 metres away.
Just trying to wait and sting you.
I wouldn't give them the satisfaction, so called tow truck people, and they came, picked it up, towed it 100 metres to my garage. It's an absolute joke.
It's pretty petty of them as well to try and sting you for just getting your car back 100 metres.
Why aren't they chasing real criminals? Absolute joke. Yeah. This is what the taxpayers pay for, this sort of bullshit.
Yeah, just for a license plate that offended like 0.1% of the community.
Because the fat cats have got their nose out of joint, and I've made them lose face. That's what it was all about.
So you've got new plates now?
Yes.
What are they shifting to?
The new plates are XXL EGO, which means extra large ego, and they are just as accurate as the first plates.
Yep, but getting less complaints from 0.01%.
Nobody seems to be offended by those. It raises eyebrows, big smile, big wink, big cheer, big laugh. Yeah, they're good plates.
Very good. So let's go back to where it all began. So you were born in Prague?
Prague, Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
Just after the World War II. Yes.
And how long did you live there for?
Only 5 years. Yep. During the war, Dad had a lot of problems. He was arrested by the Gestapo. Of course, our country was occupied by the Nazis.
Yep.
He was brought in for some brutal interrogation by the Gestapo. They suspected him of being involved in the underground movement, the resistance against the Nazis. He's also suspected of being involved with the wife of a high-ranking German officer. So he was brought in for questioning, which was not very nice.
I mean, was that just some accusation they threw at people just as an excuse to bash and torture them? Or
they didn't need an excuse, mate. They pulled anyone in whenever they wanted.
Yeah.
So he was released. That left a lot of mental scars on him. Then after the war, the Russians came in. The Brits and the French and the Americans handed our country to the Russians. The Nazis were out, but in a lot of ways the Russians were worse than the Nazis. Dad was again hauled in for questioning by the secret police, precursor of the KGB, because him being a professional, professionals, intellectuals were considered to be a threat to the communist regime. So Dad was hauled in for some pretty brutal...
What was his profession?
He was a lawyer. Yeah, a lawyer, and he was perceived to be a threat. So he was hauled in for not very gentle interrogation. And when he was finally released, Dad decided it was time to get the hell out of there. So the family hired people smugglers. Mum and Dad went out first with people smugglers.
And you were 5 and you got a younger brother?
I was 5, had a younger brother at that time, grandmother, grandfather. After Mum and Dad got through, they went to Austria, Vienna. They hired people smugglers to then get me and my brother and my grandparents out. Yep. That was pretty hairy. That was a pretty scary journey.
Tell me about that. What was that?
Okay. I was 5, but I'll never forget it. We were going across open fields, wheat fields, forests, crossing streams, rivers, dirt roads. Early one morning, we're very close to the Austrian-Czech border, almost close to freedom. We had about 20 refugees in our party with about half a dozen people smugglers. They were all very heavily armed because people were getting shot dead and killed trying to cross the border. This was the period of the Iron Curtain. It was all shut down. People were getting killed going across the Berlin Wall. So these guys were there to protect us and get us across, paid big bucks to do it. And one morning I remember we're going along a dirt road and a Russian border guard on a motorcycle spotted us. and came roaring up towards us, and the head of our party signalled for all of us to get down into the high grass to try and avoid detection, but it was too late. He'd already spotted us. He came right up to where we were. The boss of our party, the head people smuggler, stood up, pulled out a revolver, pointed it, and shot this guy right in the face, point blank range, right in front of my eyes. I'll never forget it.
How did that feel when you're only so
Mate,
young, seeing
pretty
that?
awesome, pretty awesome. That had a big impact on me.
Yeah.
It made me realise how precious life is, how ephemeral life is, how easily and quickly it can end. And that image has never left me.
Were you terrified at this stage? What can you remember?
Oh, shitting myself, of course.
Yeah.
Seeing a guy killed like that right in front of my eyes, bullet between the eyes, absolutely.
It's a tough way to
Tough way to enter the West and freedom.
Tough way to start life.
I think it made me tougher.
Yeah.
Starting off with something like that, yeah.
And then soon after you came to Australia?
Yep. Okay, we moved to Australia. Dad was a professional lawyer back home, making big bucks. Couldn't speak the language. Suddenly, Dad is relegated to manual labour in a factory, which is pretty debilitating for him, pretty mentally demeaning to do a job like that after what he was doing. So that left a lot of problems psychologically and mentally.
Yeah,
And he started drinking very heavily.
Must leave you feeling quite unfulfilled with life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One day's at the top of the pile, next day's down trying to earn a living to support his little family by doing manual labour in a factory. Fuck.
Do you know what the reasoning was, the choice to come to Australia?
I think Mum and Dad told me we had a choice to either come to Australia or Ethiopia. They were the two choices. So, mate...
How are they the two choices?
Fucked if I know.
Yeah.
But I don't know where Ethiopia came from, but they were the two choices. So, really, it wasn't much of a choice, was it?
No.
But it worked out well. Aussie turned out to be a great place.
And where were you growing up in Australia?
North Sydney.
Sydney, yeah.
North Sydney we first lived, yeah. We did the Bonagilla refugee camp down in Victoria initially, where they process refugees. And after that, we went and lived in North Sydney.
Yep. And what was your upbringing like there in North Sydney?
Mate, pretty tough. Because of Dad's mental health at that time, being relegated to manual labour and the scars of what happened in the war and his brutal interrogations, he started drinking very heavily and became an alcoholic. And when he got drunk, which was very often, he'd beat the shit out of Mum, he'd beat me up, he'd beat up my little brother, he even beat the family dog. So it was pretty horrific growing up. This went on till the age of 15.
And what happened at 15?
Okay. 15, I started lifting weights, and I must have pretty good genes because I put on a lot of muscle very quickly.
Bulked up?
Yeah, bulked up. I responded very quickly to weight training. And the next time he went to hit me, I knocked him out with a beautiful left hook. He was out cold before he hit the ground.
Wasn't expecting to get hit back.
He was not. And the happiest memory of the old man was seeing him lying on the kitchen floor out cold. And guess what? He never hit anyone again after that.
Yeah.
The violence stopped.
That must have had an impact on you.
Oh, shit, yeah. The drinking got worse, but the violence stopped. He even left the family dog alone after that. And that, for me, was a turning point in my life. It made me realise for the first time the awesome power of physical strength and physical fitness. And that's never left me.
It's interesting that was your take on that situation. When I talk to a lot of guys who have had similar upbringings with an abusive father, and sometimes the take from that situation when they hit back can be to realise that violence can be a solution. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Well, it certainly can. It was in this case.
Yep.
And, mate, I've used violence in my life to solve situations.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But but more your take was just it can be a strength can be is obviously something, an asset to have, but also can be a deterrent.
Yeah.
big.
If you having physical strength is going to deter bullies for sure, and if you need to use physical force, it's there at your disposal if it becomes necessary, and it has been necessary in my life on occasion.
I read in one news article about you that you don't drink alcohol. Is that correct?
Never drank alcohol in my whole life.
Do you think that was because you saw what it turned your father into?
I don't think, I know. That's the reason.
Yeah.
That's one of the best things the old man did for me. He was an example to me of how not to be.
Yeah.
And I vowed, seeing him get on the piss every day, I vowed that I would never, ever be like him. So I've strived my whole life to be the complete exact opposite to what he is.
Well, when you see this never-ending list of things that you've accomplished, it's seems to kind of match up that these are things that people could achieve if they didn't drink.
Absolutely. Well, not
got a
only
lot
would
more
you
time.
save a lot of money, you got a lot more time.
You got enough money for a Lambo.
And you got health and physical fitness to do sport and do a lot of things in life that you couldn't do if you're a pisshead, for sure. And I was just going to say something there. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. So you're growing up as a teenager. You're getting bigger and stronger. What happened then? Where did your path go?
Okay. I did pretty well at high school. I was at St Aloysius College at Kirribilli.
Yep.
I got a pretty good pass in the leaving certificate.
Yep.
And I wanted to be a doctor.
Yep.
So I got into Sydney Uni, did medicine.
What drove you towards medicine?
I don't know. I used to see TV shows of doctors and I thought it was pretty cool. And I thought it was pretty cool to be able to seduce all the nurses. So,
that was what drew.
That was one of the reasons. Yeah.
Hot
so
chicks. Yeah.
Nurses are pretty hot. So I did medicine for 3 years, and I bombed out. I failed. Completely failed.
You know, some was expecting like the altruistic answer, like I just wanted to save lives, but I mean, I think a lot of guys.
There's no altruism there, mate. Trust me. No.
The chicks, the nurses, sign me up.
Yeah.
And so you're studying medicine.
Yep.
And how was that going?
Okay. When I did med, I met this amazing guy named Richard Drake. I bumped him in the gym one day, the HK Ward Gymnasium where we all trained pumping iron. And Richard was the best wrestler in Australia at that time. I think he went on to the Olympics later on. We became mates and he taught me how to wrestle.
Is that called? Is that Greco-Roman wrestling?
That's freestyle Greco-Roman amateur.
Okay.
It's what they do in the Olympics.
Yep.
It's not like the worldwide of wrestling professional. There's a big difference.
Yep.
Amateur and pro is different.
Yep.
I was pretty good. I won a number of tournaments and I had aspirations to go to the Olympics myself, but I just wasn't quite good enough.
What are the rules on that? Like, you either got to push guys out of the ring or pin guys
you pin
down?
his shoulders to the mat.
Okay.
Pin his shoulders, or you win on points by scoring a number of points, with throws, lock-ups, things like that. But you can win a bout by pinning your shoulders to the mat. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's full on, very, very hard physically. Needs a lot of strength, a lot of weight training, a lot of cardio, very demanding.
And you loved it straight away?
Oh, I did. Loved it straight away. It was fantastic. But Richard taught me not only to wrestle, he taught me how to fight, and he taught me how to never, ever, ever take a step backwards in any situation, physical or whatever. And the other big thing that happened at uni, I was derailed my medical career.
Yeah.
There's a girl that I met there, and there was an incident on the trampoline in the gym one day. I think you might have heard this in my previous podcast. It's quite interesting, so I'll reveal that. We're in the gym one day. I just started dating this girl. She's stunningly beautiful. Long blonde hair, legs up to her armpits, beautiful face, stunning. We'd be walking on campus hand in hand. Guys would do a double take and swivel around to get a second look. She's so gorgeous. Anyway, we'd arranged to meet one day in the gym. I was training there with some of the guys, and it was a hot Sunday. It was a hot afternoon. we arranged to meet there. Then we we're going to go up to the library to do some study. And she walked in the gym. Every guy there stopped what they're doing just to watch her as she walked in. She sat down, watched us on the mat for a while. And then over in the corner was a trampoline. There were a couple of gymnasts practicing on the trampoline. And there's an old bloke, was he? Andre, French guy, crippled, former Olympian gymnastics coach. He was coaching these guys on the trampoline. And she got bored watching me and walked over and watched these guys jumping up and down the trampoline. And Andre, who's French and obviously loves women, sees this stunning girl walk in with a short dress just above the knees with beautiful legs. And he says to her, "Would you like to get up there and have a go?" And she says, "Oh, no, I can't really. I've never been on a trampoline. It looks pretty scary." And he said, "Look, come on, it's all right. I'm a coach. I can talk you through it. I'll tell you exactly what to do." And I'm watching this. We're all watching it. And I knew exactly what he's up to. He's looking at her legs. He's looking at her short dress.
Yeah, there's a game on here.
He's looking at the trampoline. So I knew what he's doing. And I thought, nah, she's never going to do this. And then to my amazement, she did. She agreed. She got up on the trampoline. And she starts jumping up and down. All the guys in the gym drop the weights, stop what they're doing, and we'll go over and form a circle around the trampoline to look at this beautiful, stunning bird jumping up and down. They've got a fantastic view right up her dress. Every guy in the gym was super turned on, including me. And old Andre was frothing at the mouth. His eyes are nearly popping out of his head. And then she finally got down, and I thought, okay, I whisked her off to the Fisher Library, up to the roof where there's an area where students go to have a cigarette or a break from study. And there's a ledge on the other side of this railing. So I took her over the railing onto this ledge, and when we then proceeded to christen the ledge. And, and mate, after that, we ended up spending more time on the ledge than going to lectures. I failed all my exams. She failed all her exams because she eventually got pregnant with twins. Yep. So that was the end of my medical career because of an episode on a trampoline.
And then at the top of Fisher Library.
On the roof of the Fisher Library. And the ledge was quite wide. It's about 6 foot. It ran right around the perimeter of the building. And you got privacy there. Once you're over the railing and walk up the ledge a bit, no one can see you from the roof or from below. So it was a great spot for us. We had a lot of fun up there. And then, goodbye to my medical career.
But then suddenly you're getting told that that she's pregnant. How did that feel when you're so young?
Pretty ordinary, because I was only 18, 19. She's about 17 or 18. So we were pretty young. And Mum and Dad were really pissed off, understandably. They summoned me to go and visit, to go and see them in they were living in Maitland. And they read me the Riot Act and said, "Look, you've got to do the right thing." And I said, "Look, I'm not prepared to get married, not at my age. I'm prepared to cover all expenses. If she wants to keep the kids, I'll cover all expenses. I'll support them and her, but I do not want to get married." So I made that very clear. Yep. So she then decided not to have the twins. Yep. We put them up for adoption, and they were adopted into this very good family down at Thurrool, a doctor, GP, who had a number of kids already of his own, biologically, and other adopted kids. So he took the boys in.
I mean, were abortions a thing back then, or was that was never on consideration?
There were abortions, but she was Catholic. She wouldn't be in that.
Yep.
She wouldn't be in an abortion, and she wasn't in a position to keep them. So the decision was made to adopt them out.
That must have felt conflicting, though, for you.
Well, it did. I felt very guilty about it, of course. I mean, should I have married her? Would have been stupid at my age, her age. I think we made the right decision ultimately, but I was prepared to support her financially and the kids if it was necessary. But as that turned out, she decided to adopt them out, so it worked out pretty well.
And so they were with, and you knew that they were with a family that loved them and was raising them right.
Yeah, I was relieved that they went into this family of people, the doctor and his wife. They were good Christian people. They had a number of other kids. They gave them a great upbringing. Yeah.
And did you get to have any relationship with them after that?
Yeah. I was always curious to see how they turned out. And you're not allowed to contact the kids before they're 18. It's against the law. But once they turn 18, you're allowed to. So I hired private detectives, and they found them pretty quickly. And letters went backwards and forwards.
So in that instance, are you allowed to contact the children directly, or do you go through the parents?
No, I've got to go through the parents. So when I found out their location and who they were with, I wrote letters to mum and dad. They were pissed off initially. Who's this guy coming along trespassing on our lives when he abandoned these kids when they were babies? Who the fuck is he? So they were pretty cool at the beginning. But I persevered. Eventually they softened. More letters went backwards and forwards.
Had those parents told the kids that they were adopted?
Not initially. I don't think initially. But when the letters started flying backwards and forwards, I think they told the boys that their dad was there looking for them.
Yeah.
And they indicated and they expressed an interest to meet me. So a meeting was arranged.
I think it must be just like a level of curiosity.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Well, they would have been curious to know where they came from. And I was super curious to see how they turned out, what they looked like.
Yeah, I mean,
so there's curiosity on both
right?
sides. Yeah, I think it's a primordial instinct. You want to know how your offspring are, and they want to know where they came from.
And
Absolutely.
How did that meeting go?
Oh, fantastic. We met at that floating restaurant in Rose Bay, and we had a terrific reunion, and we quickly became good mates. It wasn't like father and sons because I wasn't there for their growing up. That was their adoptive parents, and they were their real parents. They were there when they needed them, when they needed help, when they needed support. I wasn't. I was just their biological father.
Yep.
So we very rapidly became mates, an older mate with two younger mates. It was a terrific relationship.
You almost got the role of what, like the fun uncle or something.
A fun
like
uncle, yeah, fun older guy, hanging out with two cool younger guys. Yeah.
And I understand from hearing you talk on another podcast that they're both passed away now.
They're both dead, yeah, very sadly. I think it was back in, when was it? 2007. Yeah, 2007. I think Mark died. He had schizophrenia. He's on meds to control it. He wasn't taking his meds, and he committed suicide. And then 3 years, almost to the day, Roderick, the other twin, he had a very routine sinus surgery, some infected sinuses. And it's a routine operation which doctors do every day. No complications, no problems. But in this case, there were complications. He got an infection during the surgery, and that developed into septicemia. And after he's discharged from hospital, he died of a massive heart attack. So both kids dead within 3 years.
How did that affect you?
Oh, devastating, mate, devastating. It was a really tough time. I mean, no parent should ever have to bury a kid or kids.
Like
it should be the other way around.
Even though you didn't raise them, I mean, it must be still hard to know that your own flesh and blood,
mate,
that you
they're
outlived
my own flesh and blood. And even though I wasn't their real dad in the sense that I wasn't there for them when they grew up, I was still their dad. And to lose twins in those circumstances was pretty tough, yeah.
Do you still have any contact with the parents that raised them?
No, they're both dead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they both died. I think the doctor was a heavy smoker, and he died of lung cancer. And I think his wife died soon after, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of reflect back on that. And,
it's not easy, mate. I don't wish that on anyone. No parent should have to bury a kid or kids. I had to bury 2 kids.
Yep. But it's a very hard decision that you have to make at such a young age, right? When you trying to think about what's best for you and also best for the kids.
Well, you know what?
A lot of people can judge those things,
yeah,
right? But you don't know what you're going to do
People
until you're in that situation.
People can judge, but until you've walked in someone's shoes, you're not really in a position to judge. And one of the things we considered was not just what was best for her and me, but for the boys.
Yep.
How the hell can we bring up two boys at our young age? We just got kicked out of university. Neither one of us had a job. Fuck, you know. Yeah.
So let's talk about that then. So you failed medical school, and then you must have felt not only was there this whole thing with suddenly having two kids that you put up for adoption, but also trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life, where to fit in the world.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do. I did a lot of different things. I bummed around a few years. I did some pretty cool jobs. Worked as a private detective for a while. I did stunt work in movies for a while. I did a bit of male modelling. Worked as a gym instructor.
It sounds like you tried a bit of everything.
Professional lifeguard. Yeah, all the things that I thought were cool.
The things that it sounded like the things that sound cool, but also that that the chicks might be interested in.
Well, yeah, I've never been averse to the chicks either, but yeah, a lot
was
of.
this when you were also professional wrestling? At this
Yeah,
stage
I
as
did.
well?
I switched to pro wrestling, and that was mainly to make money to pay for my uni studies. I'd been pretty good as an amateur. I was pretty successful there, and one of the guys who was doing amateur, he was a champion, Ken Medlin. I don't know if he's still alive. He switched to pro, and I asked him why, and he said, "Mate, Pete, you can't eat your medals. You've got to put food on the table."
Yeah, got to make
so
money.
I thought, you know, what a great way to make money. So there was a guy named Hal Morgan, who was a very renowned wrestling promoter. He'd been a champion wrestler himself, both amateur and pro. He'd done a lot of boxing too. He went the full distance with Ambrose Palmer, who was a former world champ. So Hal was a promoter. I was good friends with his son, Demray, who was a very good amateur wrestler as well. We competed a few times. So I joined Hal's stable. He had a whole stable of pro wrestlers, and I did that, and it was great fun. Good money. I used to wrestle 3, maybe 4 times a week, but I made more money in those few nights than I ever would have made in a full-time job working full-time.
And so your wrestler name was Peter Wayne? Is
Peter
that right?
Wayne, yeah. Someone suggested, get a colourful name. It'll make you more interesting to the crowds. So I picked Wayne and bullshitted that I was John Wayne's nephew or something like that. Yeah.
What kind of outfits did you wear for
Mate,
these
I
wrestling
was
matches?
upper body was naked, and I just wore black tights and trunks and wrestling boots.
Did you have any signature moves?
Oh, mate, yeah, suplex. I was pretty good at suplex.
Yeah.
Mate, pro wrestling was terrific, and it's entertainment. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
But what you got to remember is amateur wrestling, it's full on, really hard. You're trying your hardest to destroy your opponent. I got a lot more injuries in pro, which was entertainment bullshit, than I ever got in amateur. And the reason why is you've got to learn to land properly on a loose floorboards on the ring, which are covered by canvas because it makes a loud bang. You haven't got a mat to fall on.
Yep.
So you've got to learn to fall properly. I was constantly carrying injuries, elbows, knees, lower back, coccyx. For 2 years I did this. For 2 years I had injuries. But you know what? That was more than made up for, more than compensated for by the women who used to wait outside the dressing room at the end of a match wanting to give you their phone number.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
So you're getting paid pretty well, and you've got there's obvious perks. You must have thought this is pretty.
It's pretty cool.
Pretty great,
yeah.
right?
That was pretty cool, yeah. So it wasn't just the money, mate. There were good perks. There's one very interesting incident that happened one night. There's a guy waiting outside the dressing room with a young girl with him, and he introduced himself, middle-aged guy. He shook my hand, and he introduced me to this girl as his 19-year-old daughter. And he was obviously a big fan because he's shaking my hand and telling me how great I was in the ring, how impressed he was, and how much his daughter had loved it as well. And then he said to me, I was really astonished when he said, "Look, mate, why don't you take my daughter out for a coffee or a drink somewhere? I'm going to go home and you young kids go off and have some fun."
That's a bit weird. Like, I'm a fan. Please bang my daughter.
It was weird. I thought, fuck, this guy's pimping out his 19-year-old daughter to me. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't just for my pleasure and her pleasure. I think it was for his kicks as well. He got a kick out of that. It was bizarre, yeah. That's just part of the wrestling world, you know.
Did you take her on a date anyway?
Absolutely. We went out that very night when he suggested we go out. Yeah.
Wow. So you're doing all these things. You've tried all these things, but it sounds like there was this period when you'd left studying medicine where you kind of were a bit aimless, like you didn't know where you kind of...
Okay, well, I did a lot of stuff. I worked as a nightclub bouncer at the Hilton. I disarmed a gunman there one night. Yep. That was pretty cool, except when it was all over, I started shaking like a leaf, realising I could have been shot or someone there could have been shot.
What was the point where you decided that, I mean, firstly, all these things you tried, they weren't quite the right thing for you to dedicate your life to, but what drew you suddenly to then go to law?
Well, mate, they were great fun at the time. It was terrific. I was having a ball, and I realised that I couldn't do this forever. I couldn't be a bum for the rest of my life.
I mean, I've chatted to Robbie Eagles, who's one of Australia's most successful professional wrestlers now. Yeah. He bought his own house with money from becoming that's his career, professional wrestling. You know, that some of these pathways, they could be someone's life, but they weren't quite the right fit for you.
I wasn't going to make $1 million out of pro wrestling. I got too many injuries.
Yeah.
It was just something to do at the time to make some money to pay for studies. And I realised then I couldn't be a bum my whole life, so I decided to go back and do law. And so I went back to law school.
What was the reason what was the thing that drew you towards law?
Dad was a lawyer. That had an influence on me. Yeah. Plus, I thought being a criminal lawyer was pretty cool. I used to watch Perry Mason on TV and some of the courtroom dramas, Hollywood expressions of that. I was always attracted to that, and I thought, that would be pretty cool.
So there was the image of it, but also you're clearly academically gifted. So was it that there was a level of mental stimulation to it as well that drew you?
I think I was a lot more suited for law than I ever was medicine. I found medical studies incredibly hard. Anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, that was a real struggle. When I started law, it was easy.
It just fit?
Yeah, it fit. It was like going from high school back to kindergarten. It was that easy for me. I think it's the kind of mind you've got. My mind is more suited to law than it ever was to medicine.
It must be satisfying when you find that calling that that fits your mind, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
and to be able to make a living out of something that you enjoy, that's a real bonus, because most people go through life doing jobs that they hate to make money, to buy things they can't afford, and to impress people that they don't like.
It's a bit insane when you talk about like that, isn't it?
It's true though, and they're stuck in jobs that they can't stand, they hate. It's like being in prison your whole life. But when you find a job that's cool, you love doing it, and you actually get paid for it, that's pretty good.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that get to, old age, and then they reflect and thought, what the fuck
They never know what they're missing. They never know what they've missed.
Where'd you study at?
I did med at Sydney Uni.
Yep.
I did law at New South Wales Uni. Yeah.
How many years do you have to study law?
All right. I started off doing it part-time because I was working as well to support myself.
Was this wrestling money or what were you doing?
I had wrestling money, which helped. Yep. I was also working as a professional lifeguard on the beach, and I was also working as a bouncer initially at Dionysus Wine Bar in Kirribilli, and then later at the Sydney Hilton. Dionysus was owned by a guy named Vic Fiorelli. He was the manager and trainer of Rocky Gadolari, who was Aussie world boxing champion back in the day. And Vic saw me in action one night in the bar and made me an offer. He offered to train me and manage me as a professional fighter. And I thanked him very much and said, look, that's a very kind offer, but thanks, no thanks. I want to be a lawyer. I don't want to get my face scrambled in the boxing ring. So he made the offer, but I turned him down.
He respected that?
He respected my decision.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So studying law, and you're studying that at, you say UNSW, is that right?
New South Wales Uni,
Yep.
yep.
And so you did that for how many years is that?
Okay, I started off part-time.
Yep.
So it would have been a 6-year course part-time, but I think the last couple of years I did full-time.
Yep.
I knuckled down and tried to knock it off. So I think I did 6 years all up in law, yeah.
Did you go well academically? Your
Yeah,
studies?
yeah, I got good grades,
Yep.
got a few credits, a couple of distinctions. So it was tailor-made for me.
And what was the pathway into work from there? Where did you get your first gig?
First gig was a solicitor for a private solicitors firm in the city in Gresham Street. I'm not going to mention their name because that was a nightmare working for them. I was about a year in that job and I really hated it. I was doing conveyancing, landlord and tenancy, commercial, all the boring shit. And I didn't like the bosses. There were 3 partners there and I was totally unimpressed. I was on the verge of going back to working on the beach as a beach inspector.
Because you hated it that much.
I hated that job so much.
Wow. So you didn't you didn't get straight into criminal law?
No.
It was
no.
a pathway after.
I was doing all this batshit boring shit work for these 3 arseholes who were dicks. And then luckily I scored a job as a prosecutor for the Commonwealth Crown Solicitor's Office. So that was great. That was my first experience of criminal law. I was getting on my feet, experience prosecuting Commonwealth criminal cases.
What kind of cases were you dealing with?
Under the Commonwealth Crimes Act,
Yep.
Commonwealth drug cases,
Yep.
Commonwealth frauds and social security, stuff like that. Mostly Mickey Mouse stuff under Commonwealth law.
But compared to conveyancing, right?
Mate,
you must have been
it was
like,
a
this is fun.
shitload better than conveyancing. It was good fun. And it taught me how to operate on my feet in the courtroom. So I was there about a year. And then the big break came when I scored a job working for legal aid in the public solicitor's office. And that's where the real action was. I was there working in big high-powered criminal cases, everything from larceny to murder.
So when you're working legal aid, does that mean you're working in defence?
Yeah, defending, all defence work. I'm representing people who haven't got the money to pay for private lawyers, so they're granted legal aid subject to a stringent means test. And I did everything there from larceny to murder. And in the big murder cases, I learned from the best. These were guys who were public defenders, salaried barristers, and they were the best criminal lawyers on the planet. And I learned a lot at the feet of those guys.
Why were some of these guys who are the best lawyers working for legal aid?
Good question. I think
because when I mentally think about legal aid, I always assume that it's going to be shit lawyers that can't get a job.
Oh, mate, no. Some of these public defenders were the best criminal advocates I've ever seen in my entire life. They would have run rings around some of the private guys.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the draw card then?
Mate, I don't know. I think they like the
because the money can't be as good, right?
No, the money's shit compared to private practice. You can make a hell of a lot more as a private barrister, but I don't know. A couple of the guys went to the private bar later, but the guys, some were made judges. I think it was a career path to a job on the bench, but these guys were top guns. They were the top of the crop.
How did it feel going from working as a prosecutor to switching sides to defence? Is there much difference to it mentally? Does it feel different?
Oh, yeah, it's hugely different. And the difference was apparent to me when I later went to Hong Kong. I got a job there as a Crown prosecutor. I went up there and for 8 years I was locking up tried gangsters. Then I went into private practice and for 10 years I was defending tried gangsters, keeping them out of jail. And you know what? Defence work is much more fun. It's more interesting. When you're prosecuting, it's like following a cookbook. You got a witness statement, you're going through it with the witness, leading evidence from the prosecution witness. You never get to do a lot of cross-examination. But as a defence barrister, you cross-examine all the time, all the prosecution witnesses, and that is a shitload of fun.
From my own case, I could see sometimes it seemed like the prosecution team or prosecution lawyer has got so many cases they're dealing with. They know fuck all about the case that they're prosecuting.
Mate, that's true. That's true. I know.
Compared to my defence lawyer, who seem to be prepared and know all their shit, they're just like opening their.
Well, that's true, mate. When you're prosecuting, you've got a heavy workload. There's the number of prosecutors available to do cases is limited. You might get a case on your desk Friday night and kick off a murder trial Monday morning. You got 2 days to prepare. As a defence barrister in private practice, you got the luxury of doing one case at a time and having enough time to prepare the case thoroughly. As a prosecutor, you might just jump from one trial into another trial the next day with fuck all time to prepare.
Did you find that you were able to have any kind of personal life when you're working as a prosecutor? Because it sounds
In
like
Hong Kong?
huge. Or even when you were in Sydney.
Oh, no. When I was in Sydney, I was just doing Mickey Mouse Commonwealth Crown stuff.
Yep.
Commonwealth, that was mostly magistrates court stuff. And in Hong Kong, when I was doing a full-on trial, I did a murder trial that went for 7 months. And that virtually killed all social life. Your whole life goes on the back burner when you're running a big trial. You eat, sleep and drink the trial. No time for anything else. Absolutely.
It must be hard to maintain relationships if you've got that kind of commitment.
Well, mate, I wasn't that interested in maintaining relationships. I was just interested in having as many friendships as possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
What was the reason that you shifted from Sydney to Hong Kong? What about the move?
Yeah, okay, mate. Well, look, I had extricated myself from 2 marriages. I was quite happy about being extricated from both.
I mean, was that influenced by just your general behaviour, or was it because you were a lawyer and you were just struggling to maintain relationships with your wives?
No, mate, I was constantly cheating on both my first 2 wives.
Yeah.
It wasn't their fault. It was my fault. They were both good women.
Yeah.
They didn't deserve to have that shit inflicted on them.
Yeah.
So they were better off when I moved on. And
what do you think drove that? You just weren't too committed to the marriages, or you were just you were just thinking about yourself at that stage?
I just got bored.
Yeah.
I was bored. I found monogamy incredibly restrictive, and I think monogamy is unnatural. But I got bored in my first marriage. That only lasted 5 years. Second marriage, also 5. And I just left my second wife, and I was bored with life in Sydney. There was no real future in being in the public solicitor's office, legal aid. So I had 2 mates working in Hong Kong, and they said, look, come on up. We'll get you an interview with the Attorney General. With your experience, you'll have no trouble getting a job as a Crown prosecutor. So I flew up, got the interview, got the job, and I thought initially I'd just do a 2.5-year contract and like have a paid holiday. And then, wow, surprise, 18 years later, I'm still there. It was like golden handcuffs. I couldn't tear myself away.
I mean, when you first agreed to do it, particularly after going through these 2 divorces and your work life was a bit stale, it must have had this feeling of adventure going to Hong Kong.
Yeah. Hong Kong was fantastic, mate. I was there 18 years, probably the best 18 years of my life. I met some of the most beautiful women on the planet. I met the most interesting people on the planet. Hong Kong, because of its geographic location, it is very easy to travel to any part of the world from Hong Kong. It's like the epicenter. Oz is right down the bottom of the globe, so it's hard to get anywhere from Australia. But in Hong Kong, you can hop on a plane and fly to Manila, Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City, Tokyo very quickly.
It's a launch pad for everywhere.
It's a launch pad for everywhere. I was able to travel to Europe, England, America, South America. I've been to South America many times. I love Rio. Rio's my favourite city on the planet.
Yeah. And you're working as a Crown prosecutor?
Yep.
What was that like?
Terrific, mate. Great lifestyle, a lot of fun.
A lot of colourful cases?
Colourful cases, yeah. I did some of the most amazing cases you could imagine. They would blow your mind.
Like what?
Oh, criminal cases. I've done over 100 murder trials, mate.
Yeah.
And some of them would really curl your hair. Even in Sydney, I did some high-profile murder trials.
What does it feel like to be involved in a high-profile murder case? Do you get excited about it?
It's terrific, mate. Fantastic. To me, criminal law is the only area of law that's worth doing. All the other stuff is batshit boring. I've done 100 murder trials, and every one of them, prosecuting or defending, has been fantastic, good fun.
My sister's a very successful contract lawyer over in New York, and I kept telling her whole life that she should be a criminal lawyer because she'd get some work out of me.
Okay. Well, that's very honest of you.
But, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you were dealing with some very shady characters, and it must have been satisfying when you put some of these guys behind bars.
Yep. Prosecuting, I put away a lot of bad guys.
Yep.
Defending, I
kept them out.
I kept a lot of good guys out.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of them were bad guys, but that's the way the system works. When I was a prosecutor, not long after I arrived, I found out that I'd had a contract put out on me by triad gangsters. I was part of a team that was assigned to prosecute this trade loan shark syndicate who were defrauding banks of a lot of money through dodgy letters of credit, shell companies, lending the money out on the street at exorbitant interest rates, about 60%, and the repayment conditions were very stringent. It was 60%. And if you didn't pay on time, there'd be all sorts of shit.
You can see how a lot of guys would get in over their head very quickly with those.
They were lending money to people who were gambling in Macau and stuff like that. And if you didn't pay on time, they'd send thugs around to your factory,
mess you up,
smash up equipment, break windows. If it's a residence, they'd squirt super glue in the keyholes so you couldn't get in. This went on for a while till it developed into a murder. One guy who owed them a lot of money pissed off to South Africa to escape the debt. So they went after his brother, told him he had to pay the debt. He says, "No, fuck off, I'm not going to pay it. It's my brother's debt, not mine." They said, "Well, that's not how it works. You're his brother, you got to pay it." They sent goons around to smash up his factory, still wouldn't pay. So one night they had thugs waiting for him in the car park, and when he went to get in his car, they beat him to death with iron bars. So it was now a murder case. So detectives were assigned, strike force was set up, and I was one of half a dozen prosecutors assigned to take down these gangsters. And we prosecuted. We got most of them, all the ringleaders, the lieutenants, and most of them we locked up over a period of 18 months, 2.5 years.
And so because of your involvement, you became a marked man.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know at the time, but we found out later, after it was all over and we'd locked them all up, police intelligence discovered that while the case was running in the courts, this triad gang had put out a contract on the chief detectives and the prosecutors. They'd engaged a hitman from mainland China to come to Hong Kong and do the job. We only found this out later after it was all over. And the only reason he didn't carry out the contract, he was involved in a gunfight with mainland Chinese cops. And during this gunfight, he was shot dead, but only after he took 6 cops with him.
Fuck.
So he's a pretty heavy dude. That was the sort of guy they hired to whack us.
I mean, I'd much prefer to find out after the fact,
Yeah,
right?
I was very happy to find out after the fact.
You know, because otherwise you'd be just constantly paranoid.
Yeah, but this guy's pretty
opening the
heavy.
car door.
I mean, taking 6 cops with him is no mean feat.
That's a bad motherfucker. I heard you talk on another podcast about defending this Nigerian.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Tell you about that one. That's probably the hardest murder trial I'd ever done. As I said, it was the toughest, hardest, worst trial I'd ever done. It was a legal aid case, actually. This guy had no money, so I was briefed by legal aid. I rarely did legal aid in Hong Kong, but I did because I took it over from a mate who couldn't do it. He was a Nigerian ethnically who was a British citizen working in Hong Kong as an engineer. And he had a Filipino girlfriend and she dumped him. And he didn't enjoy being dumped. He wanted her back. She didn't want to be back. So what he did, he'd send her threatening messages on her phone, threatening to kill her. So she's pretty rattled by all this. And she went to the Filipino consulate to get help. And they put her in a refuge for Filipino ladies who are being abused by their bosses and partners. And there's a lot of those. And this guy found out where she was, and he's a big, strong, fit, muscular Nigerian. And he found out where she was. He went to the place, barged in through the front door, grabbed her, beat the shit out of her in front of witnesses. Security guards, they're all little Chinese guys who are, you know, puny and weedy. They didn't have a chance. They just stood back, couldn't do anything. He dragged her out of the building by the hair, round the side and around the back, and beat the shit out of her. She was semi-conscious. There was a drainage, a sewerage drain or sewage container around the back of the building. He pulled the manhole cover off and he stuffed a semi-conscious body head first down into this sewerage container. And this poor young lady drowned in about 6 to 12 inches of sewerage at the bottom. So it's a pretty horrible death.
Horrible. And your job is to defend this guy when it sounds like a pretty open and shut case. I mean, how?
Well, the evidence was pretty strong and overwhelming, but my job is to defend him. He pleaded not guilty. He said he wasn't guilty, so my job is to give him the best possible defence that I could.
So how do you go about? I mean, it sounds like the evidence was damning.
Pretty damning, yeah.
Yeah.
We had problems in this case. There was the cops, this friend of her, a girlfriend, lady named Elsa Jacobi, found a telephone message on her on her phone at home, which contained his voice and death threats to her. She gave that to the cops, and in this message, it was quite chilling, and I confronted him with this, and I said, mate, how are we going to deal with this in court? And I played it for him, and he said, it's not my voice. They used someone else whose voice sounds like mine, and it was done by Elsa to set me up and frame me for a murder I didn't commit. I said, why the fuck would she do that? And he said, well, I had an affair with her, and I dumped her, and it was a case of hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So she set me up as a form of revenge. So he gave me chapter and verse instructions on the affair that he'd had with her before he dumped her, how many times they made love, blah, blah, blah. So when we came to court, I cross-examined Elsa about this so-called affair, which was a motive for her to fabricate evidence against him.
Yep.
And, of course, it was all bullshit. She was a God-fearing young woman, married with kids. She wasn't going to have an affair outside of marriage, particularly with a scumbag like him. So what we had to do, we had to get an expert from London, a voice expert, to come down to Hong Kong and
say that it wasn't his voice.
Analyse the voice by comparing the voice on the telephone message with the voice on his record of interview to the police. And surprise, surprise, it was his voice. So he had
wasn't going to work.
He had no way out there, so that wasn't going to work. But then the other bizarre thing he came up with, I confronted him with his record of interview to the cops, where he made full confessions. It was not just his face was videoed like we are now, audio of him speaking, and he made full confessions to the killing. And I said, well, mate, how are we going to deal with that? That's a confession. He said, oh, it's all bullshit, mate. The cops implanted electrodes in my head, and they were able to coach me on what to say through these electrodes in my head. And I thought, mate, that sounds pretty unbelievable. But
Surely, at some stage, you're saying, mate, you've got to plead guilty.
He wasn't going to. I tried to get him psychiatrically assessed, but he wouldn't be in that. But what happened, we then had to get doctors to examine his skull to see if there's any sign of surgical intervention where electrodes might have been put in. It was all bullshit. But I said, look, mate, if you plead, I could probably get a psychiatrist to say that you're nuts and you'll get a reduced sentence or maybe not guilty on the grounds of insanity. He wouldn't be in it. He didn't want a bar of a psychiatrist. So we had to bat on with this bullshit trial for 7 months. The other thing that was bizarre, because he gave me these instructions about Elsa Jacobi, where they had the affair, when it came our turn at the end of the Crown case, I had to put him in the witness box to explain to the jury why he was found hiding under a veranda just a couple of doors up the road from the refuge where he'd killed her. And I asked him specifically about this affair with Elsa Jacobi. And I said, do you know Elsa Jacobi? Yeah, I do. How long? Several months. Did you have an affair with her? No, we're just friends. Did you have a sexual relationship with her? No, never touched her. So his evidence under oath was completely different from the instructions he gave me about this bullshit, which I spent a whole day cross-examining Elsa Jacobi on. That was the sort of nightmare I had to deal with.
And you had to go on with this nightmare for 7 months, and and you're doing it as a public defender, so it's not even a lucrative case.
It wasn't lucrative, mate. It was a fucking headache. And the judge nearly drove him nuts. I asked the judge several times, could I withdraw? And he didn't want me to withdraw because he actually begged me to stay in it. If I'd withdrawn and the judge was stuck in this trial with an unrepresented accused who was a psychomaniac, the judge would have gone nuts having to deal with that by himself. So I couldn't withdraw. I had to go right through to the bitter end.
There are times when it seems like there's court cases where because of poor police work or various things like that, that guys who are almost certainly guilty get off on like technicalities or things like that.
Absolutely.
I mean, have there been times when you've defended someone and got them off, even though you know for a fact that they're like a monster?
Cops have fucked it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that,
mate, more cases result in acquittals because of police incompetence or attempts by the cops to fabricate evidence and frame him. They result in acquittals when you can expose the fabrication and the attempt to frame, and a guilty man can go free because of the cops' either incompetence, stupidity, or attempts to fabricate evidence to try and nail him. Absolutely.
How does it sit with you? Obviously you get instructions from a client that will say that they're innocent, but when you kind of still feel in your gut that this person's probably done something horrible and you get them off, is it hard to sit with that?
No, not really, mate. That's the system. That's how it works. And at the end of the day, people often ask me this question. They say, how can you defend someone when you know they're guilty? The simple answer is you don't know that they're guilty. You have to act on the instruction. I have guys come to me and they give me a version of what happened, their instruction. I think that's complete bullshit. It couldn't happen that way. And then as the trial progresses, you discover that as the evidence comes out, that's exactly how it happened. So I don't try to second guess my clients anymore. If they give me certain instructions, I'm obliged to defend them based on those instructions. So I don't second guess because at the end of the day, no one really knows where the truth lies. I don't know. The jury doesn't really know. They base their verdict on whether or not they're satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt on the evidence. But at the end of the day, the only people who really know what happened are the people who were there.
Have you ever refused a case?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of reasons would you turn down a case?
Not enough money.
Fair. What was it about Hong Kong that led you to stay there for so long?
Oh, mate, amazing lifestyle. I mean, the people I met, the cases I did, some of the cases would just curl your hair if I told you about some of these cases. The people I met, the travel. I'd been to Rio. I used to go to Rio a lot It's very easy to get to Rio from Hong Kong. I've been there at least a dozen times. Some of the most beautiful friendships I've struck up in my life have been in Rio de Janeiro.
What was it about Rio that was so amazing? I think I've heard you talk on another podcast that the women were a big draw card.
The women in Rio are fantastic. They leave most other women on the planet for dead. Yeah. They're not only stunningly beautiful. Rio women have really only three interests in life, three main interests. Number one, going to the beach, Copacabana or Ipanema. Number two, they love the soccer, the football. And number three, they love fucking. And not necessarily in that order.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
The Rio women, I've formed some of the most beautiful relationship with girls in Rio. That, fantastic.
What was your average week like in Hong Kong when you were working as a criminal lawyer? Were you dining out a lot? Were you living it up between cases?
Living it up between cases. I'd train every day. Like after work in court, I'd either go to the gym or paddle my surf ski out to offshore islands. But living it up. Never ate at home, always ate out. There are so many different restaurants in Hong Kong. You can go to a different restaurant every day for a year and not come back to the same one, and all nationalities.
There's an image here of you on your surf ski.
Yes.
Was this what you looked like when you were in Hong Kong?
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, see if the cameras can pick that up. You were jacked. You can see how between cases you would have been popular with the ladies.
That was taken when we were paddling across the South China Sea.
Yeah.
Got a world record, paddled across, made a lot of money for Hong Kong Orphan. And a whole bunch of journos went with us, including Cameron Williams and Channel 7, who did a documentary on it. One of the journos took that photo.
Was this when you broke the world record?
Yeah. That was the world record paddle from Hong Kong to the Philippines.
So I read somewhere that was like a 900 kilometre distance.
1,000 kilometres.
Wow. Yeah. I've done a 111 kilometre kayak race, the Hawkesbury Canoe Classic.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah,
I've heard of that one.
And that's exhausting. I can't imagine what it would be like to do 10 times as long.
Yeah, it's pretty full on, mate. We had a big backup support boat. One of my mates, David Liu, who was a Hong Kong billionaire, he loaned us the use of his big 100-foot motor cruiser as a backup boat. So he let us have that for free. All we had to pay for was the petrol. And it was 4.5 days of slog. There were 6 of us doing rotating shifts, and we had a lot of problems. Danny Leung was the skipper. He had a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the bridge for Filipino pirates. Pirates are a big problem there. Wow. He also had a M50 automatic carbine for sharks, which he had to use once. We had problems with sharks. There's a lot of tiger sharks.
So he's just firing machine gun rounds into the sea?
I'll tell you what happened. Channel 7 did a doco on this. Cameron Williams was the anchor. And there's a great scene in the documentary where Billy Prestige was in the water on the ski doing a shift, and a tiger shark was stalking him and getting very close. So there's a scene of Danny Leung on the bridge blasting away with this submachine gun at the shark, and you can see water spouts kicking up out of the water. The bullets are hitting the water, and the next scene there's a cloud of red blood where some of the bullets had hit the shark, and the next sinking down beneath the waves. But you know what? That wasn't the biggest problem we had with sharks. The biggest problem was flying fish. We had problems with jellyfish stings, like the tendrils coming across on our ankles and legs. There was a problem with heat exhaustion. We were paddling in 40-degree heat with about 99% humidity, the tropical South China Sea. One of the guys, Quentin Riley, collapsed into the water with heat exhaustion. We had to dive in and pull him out and revive him with ice. And he was okay after that.
But what was happening with the flying fish?
Okay, that was the biggest problem. We had collisions, high-speed collisions with flying fish.
How big are the fish?
I swear to God, They're about this big.
Yeah.
They're like mini. They're like mini Exocet missiles. What happened? We had a big spotlight shining on the water in front of the ski, so that we could read the waves. We could see the waves ahead of us, so we could balance. And this spotlight attracted flying fish, high-speed flying fish, who'd be attracted by the light and then blinded by the light and crash. They'd whack into your body. We were covered with bruises from these high-speed collisions with these mini Exocet missiles. Billy Prestige got hit right in the forehead by one of these fish, and there's blood streaming right down his face and all over his chest during his shift through a collision with a high-speed flying fish.
When you're putting together like the race plan or like the possible risks when you're doing it, I mean, you probably would think about the sharks and sun, but
we didn't think about flying fish. That was a big surprise. That was a big surprise. The other thing that caused us a bit of worry, as we were getting close to the Philippines, there's a bloody typhoon coming up on the weather facts. And we were skirting the edge of a typhoon for about 24 hours.
I mean, sharks, sun, flying fish wasn't enough. We're also a possible typhoon just to mix things up. Yeah,
we were really paddling in big seas towards the end.
I think if I was doing a surf ski race and there was possible sharks that were going to attack me, it would make me feel a lot better to have a guy covering me with a machine gun.
Well, Danny was on the bridge with this submachine gun and he looked after Billy. He whacked that shark pretty hard.
Yeah, that would certainly be a security blanket that I would enjoy. I mean, particularly, in addition to that, also covering you against the risk of pirates.
Well, pirates are a problem there. Often boats and ships get hijacked by Filipino pirates. Yeah. They come on board, they kill all the crew, throw them overboard, hijack the vessel and take it back and sell off all the cargo for big bucks.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd heard of those things happening. Like I've heard of Somalian pirates, but I didn't know that was a Filipino pirate. Well.
They're probably not as profuse as the Somalis, but they're there. Filipino pirates are a big problem.
Wow.
A lot of people die at the hands of Filipino pirates. They take over the ship and throw the whole crew into the water to be eaten by sharks.
Brutal. And this, when you were there in Hong Kong, around this time, is this when you first discovered that you had lung cancer?
No. That happened much later. Yep. After I came back to Oz.
Yep.
I came back in 2003.
And then did you come straight back to Sydney?
Yep, Sydney. 2003 I came back to Sydney.
And continued as a criminal defence lawyer?
No, not initially.
Yep.
I didn't go straight back to law. I was going to go back and I was going to do personal training, which is right up my alley.
Yep.
And I did a bit of male modelling. I was doing nude modelling for this art class.
How old were you at this stage?
I don't want to say, but I was still very fit, still very buff, still very muscular. Yep. So I had the body and the looks, which I still have now. Yep. And I was in high demand as a nude model for art classes, which were mostly attended by women.
What made you want to do this instead of getting right back into law? You just felt like you just wanted to take a total break from it?
I thought I wanted to get right away from it altogether. When I came back, I'd been practicing law in Hong Kong for 18 years, many years before that in Sydney. Yep. And I thought, fuck law, I'm going to do something else. So I'd bought some properties, real estate, and I thought I'll do the personal training bit and then did a bit of modelling on the side. But then eventually one of my mates who'd been a Crown prosecutor with me in Hong Kong, he's a QC, he had chambers in Sydney, he was head of chambers, and he talked me into going back to the bar. And so I had to do a couple of exams and went back to the private bar here in Hong Kong, in Sydney, yeah.
I mean, you must, even though it's obviously a huge drain on your energy and there's a lot of sacrifices involved in being a criminal lawyer. You must love it, right? To call you back after you want to take some time off.
It's good fun, mate. It's the best game in town. I couldn't imagine doing any other job apart from that. And even up to this day, I still love getting into court. We did a big rape trial recently, me and Sasha Milanovic, the guy who represented me on the number plates, and we won it. It was a really big win, a good win, and a very just win. The kid who was charged with rape, he's only 23. He was locked up for 16 months, bail refused. And while he's in jail, bail refused, he got the shit beaten out of him by thugs.
Well, I was going to say, you're also a marked man in prison if you're accused of, you've got to go into protection,
Well,
typically.
Mate, not only did they beat the shit out of him, he was repeatedly gang raped by a bunch of thugs. So that scarred him pretty mentally. How do you ever get over that? So I got him off and he was free. But it's a Pyrrhic victory because those scars will be with him for the rest of his life.
Yeah. That's why I always feel when you hear if a guy gets locked up for rape, they have to go into the boneyard into protection because otherwise they're going to be, they're going to be a target. But then you think, well, fuck, imagine if any of those guys are innocent.
Exactly. A lot of the guys are innocent, mate. This kid was, for sure. Yeah. I mean, Chris Dawson, who went down for the murder of his wife, and I had a part to play in that, teacher's pet. He's now under protection because he's a wife killer. The Crims have a pretty strict code of honour in the prison. Pedophiles are referred to as rock spiders.
That's right.
Anyone who kills a rock spider, massive brownie points, massive kudos.
Well, you see, even it's weird seeing, even in the news when there's stories of pedophile get bashed, you can see that the public, think good on whichever criminal
good stuff.
did that.
Big kudos.
Big
kudos.
The justice doesn't end when they get locked up. People also get satisfaction out of street justice.
Yeah.
So you've come back. You're doing criminal law again. And then was this around the time that you had your health problems?
Yeah, 2008, they found, 2008, I was training for a surf ski race in Hawaii. It was the World Champs in Hawaii. I'd been in a previous race in 2002. I went to Florida and competed in the World Champs in Florida, Daytona Beach. And I won a gold medal in the surf ski marathon. And I won a bronze medal in the surf ski sprints.
How long was the marathon?
I was about 6 kilometres up and down the coastline of Florida. And the surf ski sprints were just out to the Cairns and back, explosive power and energy. So that was pretty cool. And then I was going to do the Molokai race in 2008 in Hawaii. That was the world champ. That involved a surf ski race from Molokai to Oahu across the Molokai Channel, which is one of the roughest stretches of water in the world. And I was looking forward to doing that. I've been training for a whole year, and then I got sick. I'd been doing this trial in court, which they filmed for a documentary called On Trial. I got a bad flu. I was coughing. I just couldn't get rid of the flu. I thought I had pneumonia, and I'd been training a whole year for this race in Hawaii. And one week, I'm trying to figure out how much water to carry on my ski to get me from Molokai to Oahu. And the second week, I'm on the operating table fighting for my life, and the surgeons had to rip out the whole top upper third lobe of my right lung. And
so they found lung cancer.
Oh yeah, there was a dark shadow on the top of my right lung.
And how did you feel when you found that out?
Oh fuck, I was devastated, mate. And I knew exactly how I got it, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So massive operation, very invasive. They had to go in through the back, massive scar down the back. I've got a scar there like a shark attack bite, and they go in with the jaws of life opener and they spread your ribs apart. Apparently older guys who have this, their ribs snap because they're brittle and fragile. They spread the ribs apart and they go in through the back, and he ripped out the whole top upper lobe of the lung. Now, not only did that save my life, but I've been completely clear now for 15 years. PET scans every year, all clear every year. So I dodged a bullet, mate. And the doctors told me that the reason I survived and beat it, not only the surgery but beat the cancer, was because of my high level of physical strength and physical fitness.
Wow. So it was a saving grace that you were a marathon. competitor. Wow.
Look at this one. That's the sort of shape I'm usually in.
Yeah, you're massive. Did that change your outlook at all? First hearing that you had lung cancer, but also then surviving it. Do you think it changed?
Yeah, it sure
you
did. And you know what? Looking back on that, this might sound strange, but looking back on that, I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my whole life, because it made me realise for the first time in my life how valuable and precious life really is, and how you absolutely have to live life to the max every day that you're alive, every hour that you're alive, every minute that you're alive. And if you don't, you're shortchanging yourself.
I mean, certainly at that point, I don't think anyone would have accused you of not living your life to the max before, right? But, but do you think it affected you in terms of just appreciating the small things in life more? Or
absolutely. You appreciate the sunsets much more.
Do you think it affected how you deal with people and relationships or anything like that?
Yeah. I think it helped me develop empathy towards other people, although my wife helped me with that a lot.
Yeah.
Before I married my third wife, I was totally up myself, totally arrogant, zero empathy for other people. So a combination of my third wife and beating lung cancer just changed all that completely.
Helped you to become more grounded, more down
grounded,
to earth.
more down to earth, more considerate of other people, and more empathy towards other people, which I didn't have before.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's funny how, sometimes these things which on paper are the worst things that have happened to you in your life can
be the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's affected your lung capacity, right? If you had a huge chunk cut out.
Yeah.
So has that affected any of the things that you can do fitness-wise?
Well, it's interesting you asked me that. That's a very good question. It's certainly affected my aerobic capacity.
Yeah.
If I get on a surf ski now and I sprint and paddle hard, I've got to breathe a hell of a lot. I don't gas out, but I've got to breathe a lot faster and a lot heavier to get enough oxygen into my lungs to fuel the muscles. Yeah. Climbing upstairs, the same thing. But strength, no problem. I can still bench press 135 kilos in the gym, no problem. Doesn't affect strength at all. Anaerobically, no effect. Aerobically, it does. It slows you down. I gave up competing on the surf ski because with less lung, that's a third of my lung missing, means 10% less lung capacity, which translates into 10% less speed. So the guys that I used to beat easily on the ski before, they can now beat me because I'm not competitive anymore. So I don't paddle the ski anymore. I pump iron every day.
It sounds like that's been an important part of your life, your whole life is keeping fit. I know how important it is for my mental health. Do you think it's something which it helps to keep you sane?
Oh shit, yeah. I think you've got the endorphins, the adrenaline, and certainly it's important for your mental health. Looking back on my life, growing up the way I did, with the way the old man treated me. The way he treated me, I had a massive inferiority complex growing up, right up to the age of 15. Of course, he made me feel like a worthless piece of shit. And I went through that right up till the day that I knocked him out. And I think since that day, all the things I've done in my life, mainly the physical stuff, the car racing, surf ski, wrestling, all of that, has been me attempting to prove to myself and maybe the whole world that, hey, I'm not really a piece of shit. Yeah. And this is my way of proving that I'm not a worthless piece of shit. And that's been my whole life. I think I've been overcompensating for those feelings that I had growing up to the age of 15. Absolutely.
I think it certainly makes sense that would be a driving force and a fire within you. Absolutely. But I mean, you've only got to look at all the things, when we rattle off all the things you've done in your life, to see, okay, that checks out. But I mean, now that you're gotten to this point in your life, do you give yourself the opportunity to just sit back and go, actually, I've done some great things? No? No?
I'm going to be driven till the day I die. I'm like on a treadmill and I just can't get off.
It's not tied to rest on your laurels yet?
No. Hedley Thomas said that. Hedley Thomas, that Top Gun journo who did The Teacher's Pet, which I helped him with, he was interviewed in our podcast, and at the end he said, look, Pete, chill out, mate. You don't have to go through life impressing all the time. You're already impressive. Chill out, relax. That's his great advice to me as a great friend.
But you won't listen to it?
But, fuck that, I can't. I'm locked into this treadmill cycle in my life where I think the only way I'll stop is when I'm buried in my grave. I was in Tasmania in April 21 getting ready for the Targa Tasmania race, which I competed in, and 3 of my colleagues were tragically killed in that race.
That's a race car race, right?
Race
and you
car
were driving
race.
your Lamborghini?
I was driving the Lamborghini Beast Hurricane with a navigator, and it's a race they have every year over 6 days. The cops close off the public bitumen roads. We race on bitumen. 3 guys died. 1 guy was killed on the Friday. 2 other guys were killed, navigator and driver, on the Saturday. So it turned out to be the deadliest car race in recent modern history. And I think last year, I was going to do it last year, another guy got killed on day 2 last year. The only reason I didn't do it last year, I was practicing high-speed cornering at Eastern Creek, and I blew a tyre at 300 kilometres an hour, which not only shredded my tyre, it totally destroyed my 2 rear shock absorbers, and we had to send to Italy for replacements.
Does it make you nervous doing a car race where there's fatalities happening? Like it's obviously very high risk.
That's why I do it.
Got to live life to the edge.
It's the ultimate adrenaline hit, mate, car racing. Yeah. And you know what? I've discovered, and a lot of race car drivers will tell you this, it's surreal. The closer you get to death, the more alive you feel. And it's true. It's the ultimate adrenaline hit. And I'll give you an example. When that guy was killed on the Friday, Shane, what was his name? Shane Naven. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'll call you back, mate. Sorry. Shane Naven was killed on the Friday. And that night I had a talk with my navigator, Dino, and he said, mate, maybe tomorrow we should roll it back a bit. He's back on the accelerator. And I thought, yeah, that's probably a good idea. We were both pretty rattled by his death. We were all wearing black armbands and had black tape across our headlights as a sign of respect to the dead guy. Yeah. And guess what happened the next day? I drove even fucking faster. I couldn't believe it. This was after a colleague was killed.
You couldn't stop yourself?
No, fuck. I was driven to drive even harder and faster. Yeah. And I got an even bigger adrenaline hit because this guy had been killed the day before. You're pushing the envelope all the time. And it's true. The closer you get to death, the more alive you feel.
I mean, some people call that, is it calculated risk or is it a death wish? What?
It's probably somewhere between the two.
Yeah.
That guy, Ayrton Senna, was killed. That was a tragic death, but he kept pushing the envelope harder and harder each time. He's the best race car driver in the world.
When you see news stories that go on about, leg opener and portray you as this narcissist and a bit of a dick, it's they don't share the flip side of Peter Lavac, right? Which is stories like this. It must be nice where you're at a position financially in your life now where you don't have to just work your ass off. You can, even though you obviously do that, you can also do these kind of pro bono projects where you're doing something which means the world to you, and is something where you're trying to do good.
Mate, I'm not a narcissist in the pure sense of the word. This is something that we're running with for several reasons. One, to take the piss and stick it to the PC mob, the woke weirdos, the crazy Karens and the stupid snowflakes. I'm not a real narcissist because I care about people.
Yeah.
I really care about people and I go out of my way to help people. That's not narcissism. I am a massive egomaniac. I'll wear that. I'll cop that, but I'm not a narcissist.
But it oversimplifies the narrative, right? Yeah. Which is a lot richer and more complex than that.
I hate injustice, mate. When I see injustice, I'll move heaven and earth to try and fix it. When I was in Hong Kong, one of the most satisfying jobs I ever did, I was in North Kowloon Magistrates Court. I was waiting for my case to come on. They called the case of a Chinese guy, and the door's open, and this pathetic human wretch crawls in across the floor to the prisoner's dock. He had to crawl. No one helped him. He was a cripple, polio, beggar. They'd confiscated his crutches. They were worried he could use them as a weapon to assault the security. So this poor bastard had to crawl across the floor of the court, drag himself into the prisoner's dock, and I just couldn't believe it. And what the story was, he'd sneaked into Hong Kong from mainland China. He was a beggar to make a bit more money. The cops arrested him, begging illegally. They took him to the police station, put him in a holding cell, and he had a bit of money on him, which he'd got from begging, a few paper notes, and he decided he didn't want the cops to get the paper notes because he knew they'd keep them. So he put them all on a windowsill, and he had a cigarette lighter, and he lit the notes, and a little tiny fire started because he didn't want the cops to get them.
Yep.
There's a little fire and a little bit of smoke. The cops freaked out. They come running in with a big fucking fire extinguisher, put the blaze out, and then beat the shit out of him, this poor, crippled, defenceless little beggar. So they now charged him with arson, and resisting arrest. And when I heard all this shit, I just could not believe it. Yeah. So I told the magistrate, I'm acting as amicus curiae. That means Latin, friend of the court. I can assist the accused and the court by intervening, stepping in and doing what I can. So when I heard all this bullshit, I asked the magistrate to give him bail, and this asshole refused. He locked him up, this little crippled beggar. Oh. So I thought,
where's the justice?
Well, fuck this. So I went to the Supreme Court and I filed Supreme Court action, and we went to the Supreme Court and luckily got a newly appointed British judge who was a top guy, and during the hearing I got the crippled beggar to demonstrate how he crawled into Kowloon Court on the floor that day because his crutches had been taken. And when he did that, the judge freaked out. He was just as enraged as I was. And he not only ordered his immediate release and the return of his crutches, he gave the authorities a massive bollocking. So I got justice for this young guy. We walk out of court and he's got a big grin on his face, and he spoke to me through a mate of mine who spoke Chinese and English, and he said, he's very bemused and puzzled. He said, why did you help me? My entire life, nobody's helped me or offered to help me. My parents abandoned me when I was little, too much high maintenance. You're the first guy in my life that's ever helped me. Why? You're a foreigner. What the fuck do you want to do with me? And I grabbed his hand and squeezed it, and I said, mate, that's what I do.
Just a champion for the little guy.
Mate, that's what I do.
So
there's another case, when the Occupy Sydney movement was on?
Yeah.
Okay. They were arresting people for camping in Martin Place outside the stock exchange. And one poor bastard that got arrested was a Maori guy, Lance, I forget his second name, but the cops had arrested him and thrown him in the cells. And I went to court for him pro bono, and they charged him with illegally camping in a place overnight where camping's not allowed, contrary to the sign. And there's a sign there saying no camping overnight. Well, I won the case very easily because the cops fucked it up. They misunderstood the meaning of the word camping. I brought an Oxford Dictionary into court, and camping's defined as staying in a tent-like place. That's camping. He wasn't in a tent. He was sleeping on a sleeping bag, and he wasn't there overnight. They arrested him at 11 p.m, so I got him off. And I had all these supporters outside cheering and clapping. The media was there. They thrust cameras and microphones in my face, and it was a great win for the little guy. The cops were thoroughly pissed off. Yep. But, what a great victory.
I mean, they're the kind
pro bono. I didn't charge. I got no money from it.
They're the kind of moments that demonstrate that, a good lawyer is an expert in the letter of the law, right? It's this little bits of wording.
I know. We beat them on the Oxford Dictionary. But, mate, it also demonstrates that not all lawyers are assholes. The legal profession gets a bad rap, and there's jokes around like, what do you call 30 lawyers at the bottom of the sea? An excellent start, stuff like that. Yep. And there are lawyers that deserve a bad rap. But there are other lawyers who genuinely go out of their way and bend over backwards to get justice for little Aussie battlers.
Yep. I think it's very easy to generalise any profession, you know. I think lawyers cop it. I think real estate agents cop it.
Used car salesmen.
Right. But there's all walks of life in every profession. So what's next for you? What are your priorities now,
mate?
in life?
I've ticked a lot of boxes on the bucket list, but there's still a lot more to go. My agent, Bobby Coggill, who's a guy I've known since we were 18-year-old kids. I taught him how to wrestle. He's a top guy. He's an accountant, but he's a terrific networker. He knows everyone in the world. If there's someone he doesn't know, they're not worth knowing. When all the publicity came out about my number plates, Bobby got word that people in LA want to make a movie about my life. Can you blame them?
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's on the cards, and Bobby's in talks with people in LA. There's other people here in Sydney who are talking about a Netflix TV series.
Who would you want to play you in a film?
I was asked this, mate, and you know what?
It's got to be someone good-looking and buff.
Mate, we thought about that very carefully, and initially we thought Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
He's got the looks, he's got the hair, but he's too skinny. He doesn't have any muscles. So then we thought, Chris Hemsworth. He's the whole package. He's got the whole package.
Yeah,
He's
I was
got
thinking
the looks,
Hugh Jackman. He's massive. No?
Hemsworth's got the looks, the hair, and the muscles. Hugh Jackman's not good looking enough.
No?
Sorry. And Hugh's only buff and muscular when he does these Wolverine movies.
I've met him.
The rest of the time he's quite skinny. He's got to really work hard to get pumped up.
I've met him and he's pretty big. He's
he?
got very broad shoulders.
I saw
very
him
big
recently in New York.
He's massive.
He's normal physique and his arms are quite skinny. So if he doesn't go to the gym every day, he reverts back to his normal ectomorphic physique. So, Chris Hemsworth's got to be it.
Yep.
And when I'm the older Peter Lavac, we decided was going to be, what's his name? Gerard Butler.
Gerard Butler, yeah.
He's pretty good in 300. He
Yep.
looked pretty buff in that, so he'd be pretty cool too.
Well,
are you enjoying this,
yes,
Andrew?
very much. Well, hopefully the TV series or the movie turn into something.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think,
mate, I've already done a movie.
Yeah.
I starred in. You'll love this story. I starred in a gangster movie a couple of years ago. I was scouted by Karina Lee, who's the movie producer and star of the movie.
What was your role in the movie?
I played a gangster, a muscle-bound gangster named Seal. But let me tell you the whole story. This is a funny story. I was in a KFC restaurant in Gosford one day having some lunch. I was visiting friends in the Central Coast.
Lambo's outside?
Lambo's parked outside KFC. Karina and a girlfriend walked in to see the car and they're getting very excited and animated. She walks into the restaurant, spots me, and asked me, "Is that your car?" I said, "Wow." And then she looks me up and down and decides that I was finger-licking good in the restaurant. And then she says to me, "Mate, you would make a terrific gangster in our movie. We're making this movie. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, when's it on?" She said, "Such and such a date." And I said, "Yeah, maybe. And what do you want me to play?" And she said, "This muscle-bound gangster named Seal." So I agreed to do it.
Did you have lines in the movie?
No. I just had to look menacing.
Yep.
I think I said a few words,
Yep.
but it wasn't a big deal.
Yep.
So it was filmed in a warehouse in Gosford. They'd rented the warehouse fairly cheap, and she got all the friends, the lighting crew, the sound crew, and a few actors she recruited. And it was good fun. We had these hostages tied up in chairs in this warehouse, and they were gagged, bound to the chairs, and blindfolded. And I'm terrorising them with a gun, holding a handgun to the head of one of these hostages.
Yep.
Then the cops arrive and raid the place. And me and Karina hop in the Lamborghini, and we accelerate up the hill at supersonic speed, chased by the cops. So it was a really good, fun movie. But what was even more interesting, while we were shooting the movie, Channel 9 sent a TV crew to the movie set with a current affair crew, Brady Halls. They came to the movie set to interview me about my number plates.
Yeah.
So they interviewed us on the movie set. Me, Sasha, my lawyer, was there at the time. He loved being interviewed by them. And they interviewed Karina Lee, the producer and the star of the movie. She's a good-looking blonde. And then she was on a current affair, and then all my mates saw a current affair. And everybody, all of my mates, including Hedley Thomas, when they saw Karina on the screen, they all concluded that I was starring in a porno movie because of Karina's very generous physical assets and physical gifts. And despite all my pleas of protest and that, they didn't believe me. They all decided I was going to be a porno movie star.
The icing on the cake of all the compliments you've had in your life. Yeah. Porno actor as well. Named Seal.
Seal.
Well, it's lucky you were holding a gun. You didn't have a Alec Baldwin moment and a gun go off or anything like that.
And I wasn't going to pull the trigger, that's for sure. And luckily, my gun was plastic; it was imitation.
Well, hopefully, if they make a real movie about your life, that you get to start, you get to be in it as well. Like I know with that Will Smith movie, Pursuit of Happiness, right? That the real life guy that's based on walks past him at the end of the movie.
A cameo role.
Yeah. So I think you're due for a cameo in that as well.
Well, I think I'd be there as a technical consultant anyway.
Of course.
But get a cameo walk-on role would be pretty cool too. Yeah, I'd like that.
Well, Peter, thank you for sharing some of your colourful life with us. And it sounds like there's plenty more achievements for you. Yeah, thank you again for your time. This has been another episode of Shit's Gone Sideways.
Thank you, Andrew. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Shit's Gone Sideways.